Happy Halloween, everybody, and Tony here. I know I was supposed to review Courage the Cowardly Dog, but that's going to be saved a lot later. I've been actually very busy with a lot of film shoots and a lot of other stuff as of late. But I'm actually very excited to talk about an opera that I caught live stream from the Met. I'm, of course, referring to Wagner's Tannhäuser, which, like I said, was live streamed from the Metropolitan Opera House and was shown at the Kino der Kulturbrauerei. The conductor was the Grand Master himself, James Levine. The production was handled by the late, great Otto Schenk. The set design was done by Günther Schneider-Siemsen. The costumes were done by Patricia Ziprot and Sylvia Nolan. The lights were done by Gil Wexler. The choreographer was Norbert Fesak. And the chorus master was Donald Palumbo, and the cinematographer was Barbara Willis-Sweet. Now, Tannhäuser has a very interesting history because the first version, which was done in Dresden, was written back in 1845. What's noticeable about the 1845 version was that Venus's part was much higher, usually sung by a Wagnerian soprano. And also, Walter von Vogelweide had a solo in Act 2. And when the opera was reworked for Paris in 1861, Venus's part was then given to a mezzo-soprano, and of course, Walter's solo was cut from Act 2. But also, according to an interview from Michaela Schuster, which can be found in classicstoday.com, I will post the link in the description below, she stated that Venus's character in the Paris version is a lot more fleshed out, and of course, it's not that challenging compared to the Dresden version. And it's of course the version that a lot of mezzos really like to sing because Venus's character is a lot more fleshed out, and it's not so treacherously high compared to the Dresden version. Also, you might think that, judging by the story of Tannhäuser, you might think that it's a love triangle between Tannhäuser, Venus, and Elisabeth. Well, there's a lot more than that. The story of Tannhäuser basically involves redemption, religion, taboos, and even a lot of the human stuff that a lot of people go through these days in society. So, how Tannhäuser loves Venus is a very, very sexual and a very erotic manner. And how Elisabeth expresses her love for Tannhäuser is on a more human, pure level. So Tannhäuser is definitely torn between his love for Venus and, of course, the mortal world. He's not so sure where he has to go, and once he manages to sing his praises to Venus, he gets kicked out by the singers and has to try to look for redemption in Rome. Ultimately, he's been rejected by that redemption until someone intercedes for him, and that someone turns out to be Elisabeth when the papal staff blooms. So the story is really very fascinating. What's also very fascinating is also the various musical numbers. Now, I'm sure that those of you who have watched What's Opera Doc will automatically recognize the opening chords of the overture, the one that goes dun 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 da 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 dum dum dun dum dun dun da 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 da. And even the later parts in which it goes dun 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 dun. Yeah, I'm sure that you will recognize those familiar chords, especially when you watch What's Opera Doc. Now, even the well-known arias in this opera include Elisabeth's Dich teure Halle, which is also a very popular concert vehicle for a lot of full lyric spinto and dramatic sopranos, and even Wolfram's O du mein holder Abendstern, which is a very popular concert piece for every or any lyric or dramatic baritone out there. So now that I've got part of the history and even the well-known musical numbers of Tannhäuser, let's get on to what I thought about the production, costumes, singers, and the conducting and the chorus. The production was just so well done, which is no surprise because I really love Otto Schenk as an opera director. In fact, he is totally up there with the likes of August Eferding and Franco Zeffirelli as them being one or my most favorite opera directors of all time. Every detail has been really paid attention to, and like everything from the stonemasonry to the trees to the mountains, everything is just so well done, and the costumes were equally gorgeous, which is no surprise because it's Halloween. I mean, you're supposed to talk about the costumes as well, and they were all well done. So what more can I say about the production and costumes? They need no introduction whatsoever. They're just vibrant, full of life, and just so gorgeous to look at. And let's also talk about the singers, which I am very excited to talk about. Singing the role of our main anti-hero Tannhäuser, or Heinrich Tannhäuser, is the South African Heldentenor Johann Botha. Now, the thing about Tannhäuser is that you need a Heldentenor who not only has a very strong and powerful voice that can cut through steel, but also have some great acting chops, especially when he at first starts out really trying to chase after Venus. But at the same time, he's got his duties to Elisabeth as a lover. And then you really realize that in the third act, he's kind of losing his mind. So you really need a Heldentenor who has to have great acting chops. Any Heldentenor who has sung the likes of Radames, Otello, Turidu, Cavaradossi, the drum major from Wozzeck, Sigmund, Tristan, Rienzi, Lohengrin, Max from Der Freischütz, Don José, Sanson, and Jean de Ledin, and even Grigory from Boris Godunov. Yeah, you really need a Heldentenor who has to really have such great high notes and even an equally fascinating stage presence. My personal favorite Tannhäusers really have to be Ramon Vinay, Wolfgang Windgassen, Hans Beirer, Siegfried Jerusalem, Plácido Domingo, Klaus König, and René Collo, and Peter Seifert. Yes. So, what did I think about Johann Botha as Tannhäuser? Vocally, he is so spot on. He sings all of his notes to pitch perfection with fine, piercing tones and a very solid timbre. I am not so crazy about his acting in the first act. I thought he started out a little bit lukewarm, but not vocally. He was very fine. But he managed to get a lot better in terms of his acting in the second and third acts, which I really felt he was a lot more involved, and especially he was a lot more emotive in those scenes. He was able to really get himself into the character a lot more in the second and third acts, especially the third act, which I thought was the biggest highlight of his acting chops, thus showing Tannhäuser's descent into madness, thinking that he's going to be back in Venusberg, until he realizes that it's going to be too late for him in the end. I thought he was really putting his A game in the third act. The first act, I'm not too crazy about his acting. Second act, he got a lot better. The third act, awesome. But his voice, he still managed to really put his ringing, dramatic tenor voice to use and just use it with such fire and aplomb that he was totally in his A game vocally. He really sung his part well, and it kept me thrilled from beginning to end. Singing the role of the goddess Venus is the American dramatic mezzo, who has also had some roles in the Zwischenfach and dramatic soprano repertoire, Michelle de Young. Now, the thing about Venus is that you really need a Wagnerian soprano or a dramatic mezzo who could really sing this role well, but also have some great acting chops in terms of her being a femme fatale and even being a very independent and strong-minded character who knows that Tannhäuser has some weaknesses of his own and that she can use her charms and wiles to her advantage to make him hers for the rest of his natural life, though it's ultimately up to him. She's just trying to make sure that he probably might have to choose her one way or the other, so she's always there for some time. And not to mention, she also has to have a certain stage presence that makes her powerful, like a lioness, like someone that you could really feel thrilled watching on stage. And not to mention, any Wagnerian soprano or dramatic mezzo who has sung the likes of Amneris, Brunhilde, Carmen, Isolde, Brangena, Marie from Wozzeck, the Countess Geschwitz, Lady Macbeth, Eboli, Cassandra, Didon, Santuzza, Tosca, and Aldona, Gioconda, and even a lot of other roles, or even Marina Minishek, and Antigonae, Penthesilea, and many, many other roles in the dramatic soprano, dramatic mezzo, and Zwischenfach. You really need to have a singer who specializes in those roles to be able to pull off a character like Venus with fine acting abilities. And I thought that Michelle de Jong pulled it off really, really well, because she started out in the 90s as a compromario singer, singing it likes of Mère Jeanne from the Dialogue of the Carmelites, and the Second Lady from the Magic Flute. Somewhere in the 2000s, she managed to sing a lot more of the high dramatic mezzo roles, like Eboli from Don Carlo, Fricka, Sieglinde, and Waltraute from The Ring, Brangena from Tristan, Kundry from Parsifal, Ortrud from Lohengrin, and of course Venus from Tannhäuser, Lucretia from The Rape of Lucretia by Benjamin Britten, Amneris from Aida, and as of late, she's also been singing Herodias from Salome. So you could really tell that she really threw herself into this character with such aplomb, such vivacity, and such an animalistic nature that you really feel like she is Venus. She is the goddess of beauty, the goddess of love, and a love that is so erotic. You could really, really feel like you are charged in this character. I felt invested in her performance from her first act all the way up to her third act. Yes, Venus is a very thankless role for any Wagnerian soprano or dramatic mezzo who dares sing her. But it's also rewarding because you really get to show such great acting chops, especially when she knows that Tannhäuser might have some doubts, though she tries to reassure him that she's the one he'll have to go after for the rest of her life, or his life, and that she'll have to make sure that his fate will be in her hands unless something might come up. So yes, Venus is definitely a very wonderful character that Michelle de Jong has portrayed so magnificently. She even got the round of applause that she wholeheartedly deserves, and she is totally in her A game from beginning all the way up to the third act. She poured her heart, soul, mind, and body into this role, and she sung her high notes really well. They were all piercing. Her low notes were especially gorgeous. She was a total performer from beginning to end. What more can I say about Madame de Jong as Venus? She was fabulous, singing the role of the sweet-hearted Princess Elisabeth is the Dutch spinto soprano Eva-Maria Westbroek, who I also saw last year as Katya Kabanova. Now, the thing about Elisabeth is that you need a full lyric soprano or spinto or dramatic soprano to be able to pull off this character well. Unlike Venus, who is very sensual and erotic and quite sexy, Elisabeth is a lot more chaste, calm, and someone who is still very willing to fight to the death in order to save Tannhäuser. Think of Venus and Elisabeth as a sort of combination of Ortrud and Elsa, Amneris and Aida, Brünnhilde and Gutrune, Countess Geschwitz and Lulu, and yes, and many other roles that have either the dramatic soprano and the spinto soprano as rivals, or dramatic mezzo and dramatic soprano as rivals. So, yeah, going to Madame Vesbruck's performance as Elisabeth, I am not so crazy about her entrance aria. I felt like she managed to hit the notes well, but my major problem was that it sounded really pitchy. She sounded too sharp in some areas, that it sounded... I wasn't really so sure how she was going to pull herself for the rest of the evening. Mind you, she did so fabulously as Katya Kabanova at the Staatsoper im Schillertheater, and I thought she did a really great job in that role. Of course she managed to act well as Elisabeth. She managed to pull off her acting chops to the best of her abilities, but like I said, I am not so crazy about her entrance aria, Dich teure Halle. I have heard many other sopranos sing a little bit more in tune in this aria. I understand that Dich teure Halle is definitely a very tough aria to pull off, whether you be a full lyric, spinto, or dramatic soprano. You really need to have a clear tone, especially with that aria. I do wish that she could have improved or made a little bit of a better impression in the first act aria, but suffice to say, she ended up getting a lot better with her intonation throughout the second act and even the third act. I thought that her major highlight was her Allmächtige Jungfrau, her prayer. I thought she sang that very beautifully. So, despite the shortcoming of some pitch problems in the second act, I thought she managed to muscle through and managed to get a lot better in the third act. Nonetheless, she's still a very convincing actress, showing the innocence, the sympathy, the overall beauty that Elisabeth has, and also the strength that Elisabeth has to show Tannhäuser the way back to not only her love, but for the love of humanity. She really does portray her character well. Of course, she needed a little bit of polishing in the second act, but I thought she managed to muscle through in the third act as well, and even the later part of the second act, and thus create a character that is very, very sympathetic, and also someone that we could root for, because we know that she is a very strong woman and someone who can't give up. I really enjoyed her performance in this role. And singing the role of Wolfram von Eschenbach is the Finnish lyric dramatic baritone Peter Mattei. Now, the thing about Wolfram von Eschenbach is that you need either a lyric baritone or a dramatic baritone who also can specialize in lieder. Of course, you have your baritones who specialize in the Verdi and Puccini and Italian, French, and German, Russian repertoire, but you also need to have a singer who can also be able to handle lieder very well. Any singer who has sung the likes of Papageno, Guglielmo, Figaro from The Barber of Seville, Rigoletto, Zurga from Le Péché de Perle by Georges Bizet, Morales and Escamillo from Carmen, the Herald from Lohengrin, Günther from Götterdämmerung, and Enrico from Lucia de Lammermoor, but you also need to make sure that he's done a good amount of Lieder from Schubert and from Schumann and Mendelssohn and many, many other composers specializing in Lieder. You really need to have a baritone that really can sing with the best of the abilities in that, especially with the O du mein holder Abendstern. I thought that Peter Mattei managed to create such a believable and lifelike character in the role of Wolfram von Eschenbach. He really pulled it together, especially with his first aria in the second act, Blick ich umher. He was really involved as not only a singer, but also as an actor. I mean, it's no surprise that these days he's also attempted some of the dramatic baritone repertoire, like Amfortas from Parsifal, for example. Of course, Peter Mattei in the past was very well known for singing in a lot of lyric baritone roles, like Guglielmo, Don Giovanni, and Papageno. These days, he's actually sung some dramatic baritone roles, which is definitely a great development for his voice. And with Wolfram von Eschenbach, he manages to combine the lyrical aspects of this role and the dramatic aspects of this role and combine them into one fine performance that he just really did such a fantastic job. Singing the role of Landgraf Hermann is the Austrian basso Günther Greusbeck. Now, the thing about Landgraf Hermann is that you need a basso profondo who specializes in the likes of Fafner, Hunding, Hagen, Titorel, Gurnemanz, König Heinrich der Vogler, König Marke, the Grand Inquisitor, Sparafucile, Ramfis, Marcel from Les Huguenots, the High Priest from L'Africaine, and even Arkel from Peleas and Melisande, Dosife from Kovanchina, Pimen from Boris Godunov, and a lot of these old men or wise king basso profondo characters that a lot of bassos associate with. And also the Commendatore Osmin and Zarastro. You really need a basso that really can be noble in his execution and even deep and penetrating as well. With Günther Greusbeck, I really enjoyed his performance. He really threw himself into the character, making Landgraf Hermann a very noble, very just, and quite a stern figure, which is no surprise because Landgraf Hermann is also the uncle of Princess Elisabeth. He manages to show his tender side and even his stern side when Tannhäuser manages to get himself into a lot of crap singing about Venusberg and all that stuff. He really threw himself into the character well, and I definitely enjoy his stage presence. It is just that type of presence that really left me on the edge of my seat. It's a thankless role for a basso, but he managed to pull it off really, really well. Singing the role of the young shepherd boy is the young Chinese light lyric soprano Ying Fang. The thing about the shepherd boy is that he only appears in the first act, but he needs a more lyrical sounding soprano compared to Venus's more erotic, sensuous, dramatic soprano, dramatic mezzo voice, compared to Elisabeth's a little bit more lyrical, yet more dramatic, spinto, full lyric, or dramatic soprano voice. With the shepherd, you need a lyric soprano, or even that of a light lyric soprano, even though he only appears in the first act. And he also needs to have some great acting chops as well to be very convincing, to look like a very young boy. With Ying Fang, I thought she looked really, really adorable in this role. I haven't heard her Barbarina from Marriage of Figaro, but I've heard Rona mention Ying Fang in that role, saying that she's done a very fabulous job as Barbarina. With her in The Shepherd Boy, I thought she was really, really, really sweet which is no surprise because the thing about the Shepherd Boy is that you need a lyrical voice that has sung the likes of Ancient from Der Freischütz, Cherubino, and Susanna from Marriage of Figaro, Zerlina from Don Giovanni, Despina from Così fan tutte, Eudoxie from La Juive, Circonstance from Le Dialogue de Carmelite, and even one of the nieces from Peter Grimes, and even Gretel and the Sandman from Hänsel und Gretel. You really need a soprano who is able to contrast herself well between Venus and Elizabeth. With Yingfang, she has a very pleasant and sweet voice that was so pleasing to listen to that it just was so gorgeous and so darling. And how she managed to act as the shepherd, so touching and so heartfelt and so lively. It always brings a huge smile to my face, and I really can't wait to see a lot more of this fabulous young Chinese soprano. I really do hope to really see her in a lot more live streams and maybe even more live performances. I really spot that she's going to have a very huge international career one day. And then seeing the four other singers, Walter von Vogelweide, Heinrich der Schreiber, Bitterolf, and Reimer von Zweter are Noah Bethke, Adam Flowers, Ricardo Lugo, and Ryan McKinney respectively. Now the thing about each of these four singers is that with Walter von Vogelweide, you need a full lyric tenor, or maybe even a spinto tenor. With Heinrich der Schreiber, you need a more lighter lyric tenor. With Reimer von Zweter, you need a bass baritone. And with Bitterolf, you need either a basso cantante or a bass baritone. I felt like Noah Bethke, Adam Flowers, Ricardo Lugo, and Ryan McKinney sang their roles really well. Especially Ryan McKinney, who manages to give such a huge swagger to Bitterolf, which is no surprise because Bitterolf, though he's not a bad guy, he's kind of a jerk, in essence. Out of all the four minor singers, Bitterolf's personality is that of a jerk. In high school terms, he's pretty much like the high school quarterback who thinks he's all hot stuff, or he's the hot shot. And in this term, he's pretty much a douchebag. That's pretty much it. And I really enjoyed Ryan McKinney's voice and how he manages to portray this character well. And I also enjoyed that swagger that he gives to this character. It's so enjoyable and so addicting that I found myself totally charmed. And the conducting done by Jimmy Levine himself was absolutely fabulous. And the chorus, all fabulous chorus members, and even the dance or the dancers, I felt like their choreography was just well done. So everything was really pulled together in this opera production. And not to mention, Susan Graham was a really wonderful host. She was able to be very down to earth with the cast members, and I really loved just how each of the cast members, Michelle de Jong, Johann Botha, Peter Mattei, and Eva-Maria Westbrook, each had something to say about the difficulties of their characters. And not to mention, we even get to see a harpist who was also the solo harpist for the solo scenes from Act 2 and even Act 3, who is a young French harp player. I thought he was really down to earth as well. And even Susan Graham's interview with Sylvia Nolan, I thought was just really well done. I thought that Miss Nolan herself was a very down to earth person, showing how each of these costumes were made. And I thought that this live stream overall, though it did have some glitches, I don't know why, I thought it was still a great experience. I thought that everyone did his and her job really well. But the biggest standout for me was really Michelle de Jong as Venus. Well, among the women. Among the men, I would have to say that Peter Mattei really stood out to me as Wolfram von Eschenbach. These two were without a doubt the stars of the evening, with their very fine techniques and just really throwing themselves into the character. I thought they were just really well done, and this was definitely a really fine live stream. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in much later where I finally review Courage the Cowardly Dog. So until then, see you later, everybody.